Hi, everybody. Welcome into the Orange Zone Instant Recap, Syracuse versus Holy Cross edition. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston, joining you live right after the game essentially just wrapped up. Ashley was shooting today. She was actually inside the dome. I was back here at the station cutting highlights, etc. What did you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think any fan watching at home will kind of agree with this. Kind of a weird game, right? It's Holy Cross, Syracuse's only FCS opponent of the season. They run out to a 21-0 lead right away in the second quarter, essentially through one quarter. And then they kind of dropped the ball a little bit. They had Holy Cross in that game a little longer than you would have wanted to. The starters were out on the field until a few minutes into the fourth quarter, which I'm sure is longer than Kyle McCord imagined playing today. But at the end of the day, they got the job done, 42-14. I mean, they put up 500-plus yards of total offense, which I think is what you can expect against an opponent like Holy Cross.
Before we even get into the football, there is one thing that I wanted to address, and I can now because you were inside today. They said that this was the first sellout game of the season.
Yeah.
But it didn't look that full in there.
It filled up, but fans were surely quite delayed by more like 12:30, I would say it was more full in there, but the student section did not do well. I mean, the student section, that kind of upper rafter was pretty empty throughout the game, and then when it became a blowout in the fourth quarter, it was a mass exodus. So I will say that it didn't feel too full. Trust me, I went to Syracuse. I know how the parents' weekends go, right? You get bored, you want to go somewhere else, you want to go get food or something. But yeah, the fans did not stay, and they were also late.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, because honestly, that's something that's actually been brought up a lot. People saying, hey, well, it was a sold-out game, but there's actually plenty of empty seats. So I think a sellout just doesn't always mean a sellout, which is worth pointing out, at least in my opinion. But yes, to your point, the story of the game, Syracuse gets off to this hot start. It's 21-0. Holy Cross answers back with 14 points. And ultimately from there, Syracuse is able to take the lead, and that lead extends, and they win the game. Some good things and some bad things. Let's start in a place where we start frequently, which is Kyle McCord. 28 for 50. He had 385 yards through the air, 4 touchdowns. In the first half, 4 touchdowns to 4 different receivers. Despite the mistakes he did make, he did have 2 interceptions in this game. A part of me is like, how can you be mad at that?
Yeah, I don't think Kyle McCord would tell you it was his best game of his career. He threw the ball 50 times, which is a career high for him. Kind of crazy. He also had a less than 60% completion rate for the first time this year, but he's 4 for 4. 4 games, 4 times he's thrown over 300 yards. I mean, I don't think...
That's a Syracuse record.
Yes, and I don't think you can be mad at that under any circumstance. I think we saw a little bit of, I don't know if it was complacency. I don't really want to ever say that Kyle McCord gets complacent, but just a little bit of sloppier play than you were imagining in this one, right? The 2 interceptions, there was a fumble in there. At times, it didn't seem like he had the full connection with each receiver, which is kind of what we brought up last week against Stanford. So in my eyes, offensively, there were, despite the win, not to just bring up the negativity, I understand they won by a good deal, but offensively going into this game, and we touched on this earlier this week, you really wanted to see them get Oronde Gadsden involved because he's kind of been a missing character, and especially was against Stanford, and then you wanted to see them be able to run the ball more. Now, run the ball more, they did, maybe not as much as we would have wanted them to, still relied on the passing game for the large majority of the touchdowns. Oronde Gadsden get involved, they did not. I believe he had 1 catch.
They did not.
They did not.
They did not. But yes, to your point, go positive for a second. LaQuinn Allen did have a touchdown today, a rushing touchdown. You also had Jackson Meeks, who really stepped up. 10 receptions, 161 yards, and 1 touchdown. Honestly, one of the games of his life, at least at Syracuse. And I really liked what he said afterwards in the press conference, essentially saying that his mindset is always to attack, attack, attack. He's like, I go into every single game thinking that it's going to be my best game, but he also gave credit to everyone around him. And I will say, through these first 4 games, one thing that sticks out to me is you are seeing a lot of diversity, a lot of offensive diversity. I know that's not a term, but I really kind of feel that way. I feel like there are a lot of different weapons, a lot of different people Kyle McCord relies on. That's an extremely different feel to the way that it felt last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, it's good to see him be able to, on another day, similar to Stanford, where he didn't really have it with Gadsden. He had it with Pena a little bit, but neither of those guys had a touchdown. To be able to find guys like Hatcher, like even Daryl Gill Jr. gets in for a touchdown. And like you mentioned, Jackson Jackson Meeks, I think maybe this was his little breakout game of sorts. It was really good to see from a guy who we've heard a lot from throughout the offseason, throughout fall camp, as to how important he was going to be. But in the absence of Yazid Haynes, who was again out this week due to a family personal matter, Meeks really getting his time, especially after coming over from Georgia and really playing limited snaps there, kind of special teams, was good to see.
How about this for a little dose of positivity?
Sure.
King Joseph Edwards.
Yes.
3 sacks, comes off the bench. That's not an easy thing to do. Young player, not an easy thing to do. To say that he made the most of his opportunities would be an understatement.
Yes, he looked great in that fourth quarter when they kind of subbed in some of those guys off the bench. I think if you're Syracuse, and we'll get to this in a second, but despite the win, right, there are 4 areas that Fran Brown brought up post-game that I think are obvious to most fans who have watched 4 weeks of this team that you still want to work on, that you still want to see improved. One of those areas is rushing the passer, and that's something that King Joseph Edwards can surely help you with. I mean, I think his performance in the fourth quarter today, despite the blowout, kind of gives you a little glimpse into what you could get if you put him on the field more.
It's also a glimpse into Syracuse's future.
Yes.
He's also a big boy, dude. He
Large.
is large.
For a freshman.
I know. What were the other 3 areas that Fran Brown said needed improvement, if you remember?
So he said rushing the passer, running the football, which we said improved today, but probably still not where you want it to be. And then it was also protecting Kyle McCord. We saw the O-line have some problems today, better than Stanford, but shaky. And look, you're going up against Holy Cross. Like, I think we wanted to see a dominant O-line performance, and we didn't get it. McCord sacked a few times. And then the other area was, I believe it was...
We'll come back to it.
We're hitting the fourth area.
That's
Sorry.
Okay. Guys, she's been here since like 9. No, but I hear where you're coming from.
I'll pull it up. Hold on.
Great.
We'll carry on.
No problem. We'll carry on. In the meantime, we'll come back around to it. Gray spot, very dark spot, special teams.
Oh, the special teams were not
Brutal,
so special.
Not so special
No.
at all. They went as a unit.
Oh, special teams was the fourth area. Very good.
There you go.
You had it.
I was on it the whole time. As a collective unit, they went 0 for 3 on field goal attempts, one of which was from 28 yards away. Brady Denneberg, that's not normal for him. As far as the field goals, it was two taken by Brady Denneberg, and 1 was not. But 28 yards is definitely normally something you can count on from him.
Yeah.
I actually think that Coach Brown threw him in again for a 40-pluser just to see if he could get his confidence back.
Sure.
It did not work. It was wide left would be an understatement. It wasn't even close. And also, I feel a little bit badly because I want people to give him a little grace. I think it's one of those positions where no matter what, at the end of the game, you're coming out knowing you were the hero or the villain. Like, everyone's going to know your performance, and they're going to harp on it either way. It's kind of giving that, goalie feel. I don't blame him for missing one, and then I think he got in his head and he had a bad day.
Yeah.
It needs to not be a consistent issue going forward.
To be absolutely fair, the first one, the 28-yarder, Holy Cross got a touch on. They blocked it to some extent, so there was that. Second one was just a miss, and then they put in Jaden O for the third one, who missed that as well. It's an area that needs to be cleaned up. I mean, you can afford that against Holy Cross, but when you're in crunch time against some of these other teams that are coming up on the schedule, you certainly can't. And I think as the game was going on in that second, third quarter, when Holy Cross is still within 2 scores of you and you're kind of, those offensive drives, you're playing Holy Cross, you want a touchdown every time. So you have to settle for the field goal. Then the field goal isn't good. You kind of just suck the life out of the dome there for a few minutes.
100%. And that's kind of getting me to my next point. That's sort of what bothered me more. If you remember in that sequence, so the 28-yarder, you're right, Holy Cross gets some sort of touch on it. It doesn't go. But then they get a gift because the next punt goes 8 yards.
Shanked it.
Woof. So then you're thinking, Syracuse has great field position.
Sure.
Surely this is a great opportunity to make things happen. And they still, again, have to settle for a field goal attempt that doesn't go.
Yeah.
I think that's where you're kind of pulling your hair out.
Yeah.
Metaphorically. But you know what I mean?
Yes.
That's where you get upset. Those are the things we should be capitalizing on. And against better teams, that's going to matter. Yeah,
and you could see it was right towards that end of the second into the third quarter was that area of, why are we only up by Holy Cross? Mets podcast reference. Why are we only up against Holy Cross by 2 scores? That's when the interceptions were. That's when you felt like things were just like, whoa, let's get a handle on this. Fran Brown, I will say, had some choice words in the tunnel going into halftime. He said, "This is not who the F we are," very loudly, numerous times. He was not happy. He declined to comment post-game on what he said during the halftime speech, but he said it involved a lot of choice words, which from what I heard, it did.
He gets fired up. Can't be mad at him about that. And that's the thing, right? And end of the day, walking away from this, you look at the score, 42-14. No problems.
500 plus yards of total offense.
I mean,
I'm not mad at you.
It's all
but I'm not thrilled.
Pissed.
I'm not thrilled.
But I'm not thrilled either. I think there are definitely, you could see today the areas that needed to be cleaned up. I mean, I understand, when I look at, for example, Holy Cross's second touchdown.
Yeah.
Love a little trickery, except if it's against you.
Right, sure.
I mean, have to appreciate the beauty in that.
Yeah.
But dang, those two touchdowns that Holy Cross had, wide open looks. Wide open.
Yes.
So again, I'm not saying I get it. Like a trick play is a trick play for a reason, and it really worked. But even things like that, I would like to see that be cleaned up a little bit. I'm pretty sure that first touchdown was like a 63-yard reception straight to the house. Like those are the kinds of things where I would like to see those drives maybe played out a little longer, a little bit more fight in those drives, etc.
I agree with you. There were some coverage things with the DBs that right on both of those touchdowns, you're kind of like, why is that guy wide open? And also just defensively.
Like that was nasty.
Yeah.
Credit where credit's due. That was gnarly.
The second one with the trick play. But also, just like I mentioned before, rushing the passer, you kind of felt like their quarterback had kind of just too much time at all times. And especially against a team like Holy Cross, that's not really where you want to see that. So I think defensively, they can tighten some things up. But in the second half, and this is a crazy stat, the defense did tighten up, and they allowed 32 total yards. So second half, things were much better. First half, you were kind of like, what's going on? Also, credit where credit is due on the defense. Jaden Bellamy, the interception, the pick six. What a day for Jaden Bellamy.
Such a cool, like, how you said a couple things, like just kind of suck the air out in the dome. Like
Yes.
that pumps people up in a way that even a touchdown cannot. Like there's something about a pick six that I find to be just electric.
Electric.
Absolutely. I think that's really the word I was going to use before you said it. So great job by him. Looking ahead to UNLV, just a reminder, they have their next game coming up this Friday. I'm sure many of you already know that. It is their first road test. They will be without their former starting quarterback because of the NIL issues, which we'll get into all that next week. But
Yes.
a very interesting situation where you had a team that was ranked that was having their best season, or best start to the season, I should say, in essentially 40 years.
Yes.
And now Sluka, that's the quarterback's name, Matthew Sluka, is no longer in the picture. So we'll have to see. But you'd have to think that that'd be a little bit of an easier game going into is it week 5? But it is their
week
fifth game.
5. Yes,
Okay.
Syracuse had a bye. UNLV, I just looked at the score, blew out Fresno State today, 59-14 without Sluka. And they are really, now they're 4-0. They are 1-0 in conference. They're sitting atop the Mountain West here. So UNLV is a dangerous team, even with that whole thing. Also, Syracuse now has a short week, right? Only 6 days. I would imagine they're leaving Tuesday or Wednesday for Vegas. They're definitely not flying across the country on Thursday. So they don't have as much time this week for practice and the things they usually do. And they're hitting the road for the first time, right? They've been home the first 4 games. Now they have a gnarly road trip. They go to UNLV, NC State. They got a bye in there, and then they go to Pittsburgh. I said this.
Tell them what you said about
on
basketball.
TV today because this is crazy. They are going to play basketball in the JMA Wireless Dome, Syracuse basketball, men's and women's exhibition, before the football team gets back. They get back on November 2nd against Virginia Tech. The weather will be cold. Like today was like 70 degrees. Like it's all over, folks. So
like that is unbelievable.
Yes. It's the second straight year. This is just something I'd like to say as a note that Syracuse doesn't have a home game in October. And I don't make the schedule and I'm not in those meetings. But October is one of the best months in central New York, in my opinion, possibly the best one. The weather's great, like the fall, the leaves, so much to do. It's just a great time.
The leaves.
And I just feel as though it's a great time for home football, right? In 2022, they had a bunch of those ranked matchups, I believe, in October, and it was really a good time. So no home football in October, I don't like it.
Ashley stamp of disapproval.
Disapproval.
I hear you. And honestly, I don't even love the even from the broadcasting standpoint, like the back to back to back to back, I'd prefer they just be a little more dispersed.
Yeah, give me a home and then an away. Like
September,
mix it up,
October,
you know?
November.
Sure.
Anyway, we're not in those meetings, but let us
We
know.
are not.
Let us know your opinion on that. Curious to see what you guys think. Final thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up, and we will see you guys next Wednesday.
Final thoughts, what I said before, right? It was a blowout win. You expected a blowout win against Holy Cross. At times into the third quarter, you actually felt like they were losing. That's how much the momentum was not there. So they have some stuff to clean up. Special teams notably, defense also, and on offense, I think it's important to get that run game really back to where it needs to be kind of that multi-dimensional offense. One other note, we did see Michael Johnson Jr. enter the game as the backup quarterback when McCord came out, which I think we kind of had a pulse on in fall camp, but Carlos Del Rio Wilson, who's been that guy the last few years, was not that guy today. So that's my last thing I'll say. And short week. They got to get ready for Vegas.
Short week, baby. They got to get ready. Hey, quick note for any of you guys who are Mets fans and interested, it's about to be a big playoff push for them. And if you don't know this already, just want to tell you, we do actually have another podcast we do called Why Am I a Mets Fan that drops every Tuesday. So if you're interested in the Mets, you want to see what happens in this playoff race, stick with us on that and follow us on YouTube. Otherwise, we will see you back here next Wednesday. Find us on YouTube, social media, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. We'll see you back here next Wednesday.